The Penguin is a limited 8-episode series that acts as a follow-up to Matt Reeves' 2022 Batman movie, in which Oswald Cobb, aka the Penguin, plays a supporting role. The series follows Oz as he looks to solidify his place in the criminal underworld after the death of mob boss Carmine Falcone, as Oz now has the chance to fill the gap left by Carmine and become Gotham's biggest mafia kingpin. In the movie, Carmine is played by veteran actor John Turturro. Though the character dies, he does appear in the series in flashback scenes where he is played by Mark Strong. In my previous video, we talked about the actor being replaced and the performances they give. Personally, I liked Turturro in the role more, though Mark did give a strong performance with his limited screen time. According to the showrunner Lauren LaFranc, Turturro did not return to the show due to scheduling conflicts, with her saying, "Well, practically, John was just unavailable to us. He had scheduling conflicts and we couldn't make it work, but honestly, I'm so thrilled that we brought Mark Strong on. I think he's really good." Even though, maybe in the beginning when you first meet him, you might think, oh, well, for fans of the Batman, I'm so used to John Turturro. And obviously John's a great actor, but I feel like the gravitas that Mark brings, it's different, it's very specific, and I hope by the end of that episode, you're just thinking, that's Carmine Falcone, and you're engaged in what Mark brings to it. But it turns out this might not actually be the case, because Turturro himself has come out and given a completely different reason. Check out this extract from an interview he did with Variety. It says, "Turturro won't reprise his role as Carmine Falcone for the spin-off series The Penguin. Instead, Mark Strong will take on the mafia don that Turturro played in The Batman. I did what I wanted to do with the role," he said. "In the show, there was a lot of violence towards women, and that's not my thing." Falcone radiated brutality in The Batman, but in the 2022 movie, his cruelty is implied rather than illustrated. "It happens off-screen," Turturro said. "It's scarier that way." Turning down a return to Gotham was also partly the reality of there being more opportunities than time. "You can't do everything you want to do," he admits. Okay, so he does acknowledge that there may have been a scheduling thing, but this is really interesting that he's come out and literally given a completely different reason for not doing the show. I know this will sound like a complete lie and very easy to say in hindsight, but when I was working on the previous video, it did cross my mind that maybe LeFranc's statement was a bit of PR to cover up the real reason why Turturro didn't really come back. I was thinking that maybe this big-time Hollywood actor maybe didn't want to do a bit part in a limited show. But this reason he has cited is quite puzzling, and to be honest comes off as a little eye-rolling. I mean, sure, if you looked at the script and thought, yeah, I don't really want to be playing a guy who strangled half a dozen women, fair enough. And I do agree that explicit violence can be less effective than implied violence. And he did speak in the interview about the death of his brother in 2022 after the Batman movie came out, so maybe he just wasn't mentally in a place to play such a dark role. But I am still a little confused by his reasoning. There is violence to women in the show, but like the movie, it is off-screen. Carmine isn't running around with his hands outstretched like a giallo villain. At most, he glares angrily. In fact, isn't the opposite the truth of what he's saying? I don't remember Carmine himself actively doing violent things in the show. It's all implied off-screen. Whereas in the movie, he tries to strangle Catwoman, who's also his daughter in the film. He is heard taking out a girl in an audio recording, and it is mentioned he strangled another. Maybe, I guess, it isn't what his character does, but just the violence to women in the show in general that he finds off-putting. The main on-screen violence in the show is towards the character Sophia, but this is part of a backstory that leads to her becoming a strong force of nature in the criminal underworld. The violence against her is never celebrated by the show. And she commits half the violence in the series, shooting a young guy and gassing an entire family. And yeah, there is a woman who gets burnt to a crisp, but that happens to her son as well simultaneously. Maybe he just didn't enjoy that experience on the movie, and at the age of 67, where he has a lot of money but not all the time in the world, just doesn't want to do it again. But he does make a point to compare this series to the movie, and say that the film had implied violence, and that's what confuses me. Or maybe he's going through a personal transformation or something. It kind of reminds me of when Jim Carrey did Kick-Ass 2 and then condemned the film for gun violence, which was so strange. But other Carrey interviews and incidents shows that he was going through some issues at the time. Also, not to be that guy, and I know that as a man there is inherently a different feeling towards violence when it's directed at women, but I gotta say, are we going to ignore the amount of violence in the show directed at men? Turturro did play a psychotic gangster who killed anyone who was in his way in the movie, including Bruce Wayne's parent. But all of a sudden, the events in The Penguin are too much? To be fair, at the time of this video, the series has a few episodes left. Maybe Carmine shows up again and does something horrific. Maybe the script he read was different and had more violence. Or maybe he just doesn't want to do a role like that again. There's loads of reasons why he could have suddenly decided he didn't want to do the show. Who knows? It doesn't have to be completely logical, he is human. He might just not have liked the small pay for a series for the amount of days he'd have to work. But violence against women just sounds better. Or maybe Variety has taken the quote out of context. I do think the part where he says, "I did what I wanted to do with that role," is one of the most telling quotes. It's like he's saying he did the job, he got paid, and doesn't want to revisit it for a few minutes for some flashbacks. Interestingly, LaFranc responded to Turturro's comments, saying, "I completely respect an actor who doesn't want to take on a role for whatever their personal reasons. I only want people to join our show who are excited and want to further the story we're trying to tell. I think Mark Strong did a really fantastic job. He made the character his own and also really honoured what John Turturro did. To my knowledge, it was due to scheduling conflicts." I guess ultimately there were scheduling conflicts, but where in other cases this can be worked around, Turturro didn't care for the script enough to find a better way to join the show. What do you make of his reasoning? Let me know in the comments section below. Subscribe to the channel and thanks for watching.